Yesterday, 200 men sang me a drunken happy birthday on this oil rig. This morning, I woke up to an alarm screaming in an empty room. They're all gone. They left me behind with half-eaten breakfasts, warm coffee, and one terrifying question that's been echoing in the silence ever since. What in God's name were they running from? The first thing I knew was the noise. A skull-splitting, gut-churning, electronic scream that clawed its way through the thick woolly blanket of a world-class hangover. It was the kind of noise that meant fire, or abandoned ship, or the end of all things. For a moment, lying there in my narrow bunk, with my head full of angry, drunken bees, I thought it was just part of a dream I'd been having. Something about my ex-wife, Brenda, chasing me through a supermarket with a checkout scanner that shrieked every time it got close. But the noise didn't stop. It was the rig's general alarm. A klaxon designed by a sadist to be so unbearable that even a dead man would sit up and take notice. Get up, Frank. Get the hell up. My name is Frank Miller, and yesterday was my 40th birthday. The big 4-0. The boys had thrown me a party in the rec room. A proper piss-up. There was a bottle of whiskey that had been passed around, warm cans of high-strength beer, and a lopsided cake someone's wife had sent out on the last chopper. I'd had more than my fair share. 40 years old, divorced, working a 3-on, 3-off rotation on a rust bucket in the middle of the North Sea called the Staghorn 7. Yeah, I'd had a few. I swung my legs out of the bunk, and the room did a slow, nauseous pirouette. The alarm was relentless. It was a physical thing, pressing in on me, vibrating through the steel floor into the soles of my feet. I fumbled for my jeans and a shirt, my brain feeling like a loose bolt, rattling around inside my skull. All right, I'm coming, I mumbled to the empty room. The corridor was empty. The emergency lights strobed rhythmically, painting the grey walls in frantic strokes of red. That was the second thing I noticed, right after the noise. The silence underneath it. There should have been shouting. The thunder of 200 men in steel-toed boots, running for their muster stations. But there was nothing. Just the lonely yell of the alarm and the sound of my own breathing, smelling faintly of last night's whiskey. A cold dread, colder than any North Sea wind, began to snake its way through the fog of my hangover. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small and thin. "Dave? Macca?" Only the klaxon answered. I stumbled towards the canteen, the main gathering point. The journey felt strange, like walking through a photograph. Everything was exactly as it should be, but utterly devoid of life. The door to the canteen was propped open. Inside, the scene was so mundane, it was terrifying. Half-full mugs of tea and coffee sat on the tables. A plate of half-eaten toast, the butter melting into the bread. A copy of the Daily Record lay open to the sports page. It was a scene of breakfast interrupted, frozen in the middle of a Tuesday morning. It looked like everyone had simply vanished between one bite and the next. I walked over to a coffee mug and touched its side. It was warm. Not hot, but warm. This had happened recently, mere minutes ago. I was starting to breathe more heavily now. I felt in the pit of my stomach that something was wrong. I ran out of the canteen and up the metal stairs to the control room. The door was wide open. Surprisingly, the room was empty. A bank of monitors showed camera feeds from around the rig. Empty corridors, empty decks, empty workshops, all strobing red. I ran to the window that overlooked the main deck and the sea beyond. The waves were choppy, a nasty, grey, churning mess under a sky the colour of a bruise. And then I saw something in the distance. The last lifeboat. It was already 100 yards out, a tiny orange beetle scuttling away from the rig, as fast as its little engine could carry it. It was crammed with people, a chaotic jumble of orange life jackets. They weren't looking back. They were just leaving. Leaving me. I screamed at the top of my voice cracking. I banged on the thick, reinforced glass of the window, a useless, pathetic gesture. I screamed at them to come back. It did me no good. They didn't see me, or if they did, they didn't care. The little boat grew smaller and smaller, until it was just another speck of orange on the furious grey sea. And then it was gone. I stood there, my forehead pressed against the cold glass. The klaxon still loud in my ears. 200 men. 200 souls on this floating city of steel. And they'd all left. Without me. I finally found the kill switch for the alarm in the chief engineer's office. The sudden silence was almost as shocking as the noise had been. All I could hear was the lonely howl of the wind outside of my thumping heart. My training kicked in. Frank Miller, 40 years old, maintenance tech, and now, apparently, the sole operator of the Staghorn 7. Check the comms, my brain supplied. Report an incident. I went back to the control room and sat down at the communications console. The power was on, the systems were humming, but the radio was dead. Not just quiet, dead. I worked the dials, switched frequencies from marine band to air band to the emergency channels. Nothing. Not even static. It was like the air itself had been scrubbed clean of all signals. The satellite phone was the same. No signal. No connection. Nothing. The world had hung up on me. Panic, cold and sharp, began to encroach on me. I fought it down. There's a reason for this, I told myself. There's always a reason. Solar flare, maybe. A massive one, knocking out all communications. It would explain why the crew had evacuated in such a hurry. A general order, broadcast before the blackout. It made a kind of sense. And it meant they'd be back. A rescue crew would come. All I had to do was wait. The first week was the hardest. The rig, once a place of constant noise and activity, was now a 200-man tomb. My own footsteps echoed in the vast empty spaces. I talked to myself just to hear a voice. I'd walk into the empty mess hall and say, "Evening, lads, what's for tea?" The silence that answered was almost something you could grab. A heavy blanket that smothered all hope. I took inventory. There was enough non-perishable food in the stores to last a man for years. Tinned stew, beans, peaches in syrup. Enough diesel to keep the emergency generator running for a decade. Enough water in the desalination tanks to fill a swimming pool. Physically, I was fine. I was the king of a steel castle, provisioned for a siege. But my mind was another story. I started leaving the lights on in corridors I wasn't using. I'd turn on a radio in the rec room and tune it to a dead channel, just for the soft, comforting hiss of the white noise. It was company. By day 15, the hope of rescue had faded from a burning flame to a dull, aching ember. No ship had appeared on the horizon. No helicopter had clattered through the sky. The silence on the radio remained absolute. I was alone. The knowledge settled into my bones, a deep, permanent chill. They weren't coming back. I didn't know why they'd left, but I knew, with a certainty that was as solid as the steel beneath my feet, that I'd been abandoned. On day 26, my routine broke. I'd read every paperback on the rig twice. The loneliness was becoming a real problem. I'd always enjoyed my alone time before this happened, but this was something else. I needed a project, something to do. More than that, I needed an answer. Why had they left me? I decided to do a full system sweep of the lower decks, the places no one goes. It was just an excuse, really. An excuse to look for clues. I started on D-deck, the guts of the rig. A place of machinery, storage, and darkness. I put on my overalls, grabbed a high-powered torch, and descended into the belly of the beast. The air down there was different. Cold, still, and thick with the smell of old oil and brine. I was walking past a row of storage units when I saw it. A door that shouldn't have been there, or rather, a door that shouldn't have been sealed. It was a standard steel bulkhead door, leading to the medbay access corridor. But it was different. Someone had welded thick steel bars across it, a crude, frantic job. A large, faded biohazard symbol had been spray painted across the front, along with a single, stark word: keep out. My heart started that familiar beat. This was wrong. The medbay was a clean, sterile place. Why would anyone seal it like this? This was a clue. This was the answer. It took me the better part of the day to get through. I found a cutting torch in the workshop, and with a grim sense of determination, I went to work. The wail of the torch cutting through steel cut through the silence like a hot knife through butter. Sparks showered the floor. Finally, with a groan of tortured metal, the last bar gave way. I pushed the heavy door open. The corridor beyond was dark. The air that wafted out was foul. It smelt like a hospital. A bizarre mix of cleanliness and death. I stepped inside. The medic's office was at the end of the hall. The door was unlocked. Inside, it was a mess. Papers were strewn across the floor. A chair was overturned. It looked like someone had left in a hurry. On the desk, under a broken mug, was the medical logbook. I sat down, my hands shaking, and began to read. The first few entries were mundane. Burns, cuts, a case of food poisoning. Entirely normal stuff for life on an oil rig with this many people. Then, an entry from 10 days before the quiet. Patient Henderson J, driller. Complaining of severe migraine, fever, photosensitivity, quarantined in Medbay 2. Standard flu protocols. The next entry was 2 days later. The medic's neat handwriting was becoming shaky. Henderson's condition has deteriorated. Extreme aggression, paranoia. Tried to bite one of the orderlies. Had no choice but to sedate him. His skin's taken on a strange, greyish pallor. Never seen anything like it. Sent a sample for analysis on the last chopper. Waiting for results. The entries for the next few days were a chronicle of a descent into hell. Henderson's fever spiked. He became non-verbal, communicating only in animalistic snarls. He developed an unnatural strength, breaking the restraints twice. Then, the entry from the day before the evacuation, the morning of my birthday. 8:45 a.m. Henderson expired. Cause of death, massive organ failure. Body secured in Medbay 2, pending transport and autopsy. The quarantine is absolute. God help us if this thing is airborne. I felt a wave of relief. He was dead. It was some kind of freak virus, but he died. The crew must have panicked and fled. It was an overreaction, but it explained everything. Then, I saw there was one last entry. It wasn't written in the logbook. It was scrawled on a prescription pad, the pen digging so hard it had torn the paper. The handwriting was a frantic, terrified spider crawl. 14:20. It's moving. Oh Christ, it's moving. Not breathing. No heartbeat on the monitor, but it's moving. It sat up. The eyes. God, the eyes. It's not Henderson anymore. It's just hungry. Broke the door. Can't get out. It's in the corridor. Oh God, it's in the... The writing ended there, in a long, dark smear of ink. I dropped the book as if it was on fire. The noise it made hitting the floor was unnaturally loud. And from down the dark corridor, from the direction of Medbay 2, came an answering sound. It was the sound of something heavy and wet being dragged along the floor. And it was getting closer. I scrambled backwards out of the office. It's not Henderson anymore, it said. I shone my torch down the corridor. At the far end, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was shaped like a man, but it was wrong. All wrong. Its skin was paper thin and torn in places. The open wounds weren't bleeding though, which was odd. It was wearing the tattered remains of a patient's gown, which hung off of its body. Its movements weren't like a human's. One of its legs was broken and bent, dragging behind it like a useless appendage. That must have been the scraping sound I'd heard. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But the worst part was its head. It lolled on its neck, its jaw hanging open, and its eyes. Macca said years ago that he'd seen a dead body during his time in the army. He said it was the eyes that was the worst thing about it. He wasn't wrong. But I could see a faint red glow which defied all explanation. Aside from the fact, of course, that this was a dead body standing completely upright. Just when I thought it hadn't seen me, its head snapped up, and it let out a sound. Not a roar, not a scream. A high-pitched, clicking shriek, like 1,000 insects trapped in a jar. And then it started to run. It moved with a horrifying, lurching speed, its good leg propelling it forward in a grotesque sprint. I didn't think, I just ran. Back the way I came, through the heavy door I'd cut open, and slammed it shut. I fumbled with the lock, my fingers feeling like fat, clumsy sausages. I heard it slam into the other side of the door, a deep, wet thud that vibrated through the steel. I didn't wait to see if the lock would hold. I ran. Through the dark engine rooms, up the metal stairways, the creature's clicking groan echoing in my ears. I didn't stop running until I reached the upper decks. I found a small reinforced storage room used for sensitive electronic equipment. I threw myself inside, slammed the heavy door, and spun the locking wheel until my hands were raw. That was about 3 days ago now. The room I'm in is a small steel box with no windows. Luckily, I have a few bottles of water and some emergency nutrition bars in my pack. Enough for a week, maybe, if I'm careful. The scratching started about an hour ago. A slow and steady scraping on the other side of the door. It knows I'm in here. It's patient. It must be able to smell me. It has all the time in the world. I'm the only source of warmth, of life, on this entire vast structure. And it's very, very hungry. I'm trapped. My kingdom has shrunk from a steel island to a steel box, and the options are dwindling. I have 3 doors in front of me. Door number 1 is the one I'm leaning against. I can stay here. I can wait for the food and water to run out. I can listen to it scratching, day after day, until I'm too weak to move. And then I can wait for it to finally break through. A slow, quiet, terrifying end. Door number 2 is the same door, but open from my side. I can take the pipe wrench I have with me. I can open the door and face it. Maybe I'll get lucky. Maybe I'll land a good hit. But I saw its eyes. I know that's a fool's hope. A fast, violent end. Then there's door number 3. There's an emergency escape hatch in the ceiling of this room. It leads to the outside gantry, 300 feet above the churning, black sea. I could climb out, walk to the edge and just step off. The fall. The cold. A different kind of fast end. So that's my question to you, to the empty world that will never hear this. The slow death, the fast one, or the fall. You're me. You're sitting in the dark, listening to the monster scratch at your door. Which one do you choose? I must have gone mad from the isolation, talking to myself like this. I guess it's natural to take my mind off the horrible noises coming from outside.